my whole goal for my personal statements is to tell a story, and within that story, answer a few questions. So my number one question I want to answer was like, why law school? And then making some type of connection between my story and law, and to focus on myself. I read a few personal statements. It's very easy to talk about like how great your mom is, or your dad, or your grandparents. But it's really important to focus on your unique story. It's cool to mention them, how they impacted you, but you want to make sure that like you're applying the Harvard law. Like your grandma's not. You know what I'm saying? So you might want to mention how she influenced you, but just don't focus it solely on your grandma. So again, they like narratives. We're already a very different population, so it's going to sound similar to a diversity statement at times, which is hard. It was kind of hard for me to write a diversity statement and a personal statement because they both kind of sounded similar. So I just told two different stories. I told two very different stories. My first one was kind of just about why law school, and that one centered around my time being formerly incarcerated. And then my diversity statement was more so around my diversity of thought and how me being black, a traveling student, low income, affected my thought. And that was kind of like my two essays.
So what I think makes for a good personal statement, I think there are two things. The first being well written. Here at law school, a large portion of what you will be doing is conveying ideas in a particular manner, in a well-written manner. And so I think that one of the things that admissions looks for is making sure that you've done that in your personal statement. So aside from getting to know you, making sure that your grammar, your spelling, everything is in check and that ideas are flowing properly. Second thing is I think being authentic. I wrote about something completely unrelated to law school in general. So I wrote about fashion, my love for fashion, how I sewed, what it taught me in life. So I think you can really take it anywhere that you want to go, just as long as you are being true to yourself. I do really think that admissions knows when you're not being truthful and just saying something just to say it. That also kind of leads into one more thing, who you share your personal statements with. I shared it with one person and left it at that. It was my mom, and I just told her to check for grammar and spelling and no content. I think that who you are can get lost in your personal statement if it goes through too many reviews, so just make sure to keep that in mind.
My advice for you when you're applying is to really take time and take breaks between your writing, especially when it comes to your personal statement and your diversity statement. It's important to build in time to take a break and reflect on the message and kind of what you're trying to deliver. My other piece of advice is if you can, get a professor or someone who does any sort of admissions, and it can be to programs, it can be to schools, it can be anything, to review your essay. I think folks who have that intimate knowledge when it comes to, comparing and contrasting candidates that are applying for positions, anything, I think those are the people that can really look at your essay and give you great feedback.
Personal statements. So personal statements are really tricky. I took a while to finish my personal statement. I want to say my personal statement was probably the last part of my application. That means I had all of my letters turned in, I had my diversity statement ready to go, my resume was tight, everything was pretty much done, and there was the personal statement looming at me. And I would say this is that I knew my reason for wanting to go to law school was deeply personal. It dealt with my brother, it dealt with incarceration, it dealt with the intersection of a lot of different things, what it means to be a Black woman who grew up in South Central LA, limited resources, you name it, and talking about coming to a place like Harvard and how that was going to give me the opportunity to be the voice and the advocate in the room with a different set of tools. All that was deeply personal. And so one of the things that I get asked questions about is like, what do you write about? And I will say, really, I think even though it's a cliche thing to potentially write about is why you came to Harvard. I think that's a great reason. And if it's personal, I usually get asked the question, is it possible to overshare? I say it depends. For me, it didn't feel like oversharing. I didn't need to go into a great amount of detail of what it meant to get the phone call, saying that my brother had been incarcerated. I didn't talk about my first time being in a jail. There were things that I knew I didn't need to have in that essay. I knew that I would be able to articulate why I wanted to come to law school, why the law was important to me, with keeping it honest, but not oversharing to the point where I felt uncomfortable reading it. And more importantly, feeling uncomfortable about somebody else reading it and then potentially asking me about it. So it's hard to answer yes or no on whether or not you can overshare something. I feel like it's really based on your comfort level and what you would feel comfortable with somebody asking you about. Because at the end of the day, you are having a group of professors and people who are going through the applications who are going to review it and potentially interview you and have follow-up questions. I had a lot of people review my written documents. So I would say my personal statement, I probably had it looked at, I want to say 5 people, probably 5 people, different family members, different friends, people who knew me, people who would understand my tone. And one of the things that was really helpful was to have them all read different versions of it. And so when I say different versions of it, so different stages of the drafting. So I used my parents, but specifically my mom, when it was very, very rough. I mean, rough. But I knew she would be somebody who could help me make sense of my thoughts and tell me if my flow was on or not. Then I had a family friend or somebody who I had met through the law school process, who I knew was adjacent to the legal community, who could read it and tell me if this made sense. Because one of the things that I did in my applications is I talked about what I felt the law could do for me, for my family, and what it would mean to have impacted leadership within the law, meaning people who had been impacted by a particular set of laws, then helping shape those laws. And I'm not a lawyer, so I wanted to make sure that it made sense logically. And so I had them look for that. So I'd say if you have people reviewing, it's really helpful if you give your reviewers like an idea of what you're looking for. If it's not just simply typos and like misspelled words and like a missing comma, if you're actually looking for, does this flow? Does this make sense? Does this seem authentic? Let your reviewers know, because that's really helpful in getting that like specific feedback. I would also say if you don't have access to a lawyer, that's okay. As long as somebody can read and understands what you're trying to go for, then you have more than enough resources available to help you read your statement and come up with a beautiful story about your life and why you want to go to law school. So I did say why I was applying to law school, and specifically why I was applying to Harvard. I think my line was something like, there's no better place to learn from the best and brightest minds in the country than Harvard Law School, and that I would take the brand and do something wonderful with it, something to that effect. But I'm telling you, it was a sentence. I didn't really go into great depth because I want to be very honest. I was using a personal statement over and over for different schools that I was applying to. And one of the mistakes that I did not want to make was listing the wrong school in the application. Ooh, no, that's like a big no. Please don't do that. So I tried to make sure that I had something like in brackets of the template that said insert line about law school here. And so I really kept it brief. I kept it to a sentence.